Hey there, Brad Castor from GreatOptionTradingStrategies.com. Apparently, and I read this on the internet, so it must be true, but given how much energy it contains, a single average lightning bolt could theoretically power a small city, at least for a few minutes. In the same way, if you write or trade covered calls, which is collecting a premium payment upfront in exchange for giving someone the right to buy your shares within a certain time frame, if at some point it becomes advantageous for them to do so, well, sometimes lightning strikes your stock and that stock explodes higher. Now, if, or rather when, this scenario happens, you're typically going to have one of two responses. One reaction is, damn, I really wish now I hadn't written that call because I don't actually want to lose my shares, especially now that they're so much more valuable. The other reaction is, damn, I really wish now I hadn't written that call. I'm okay with losing the shares, but I hate leaving all this money on the table. Is there some way I can claw some of that back? Well, good news, bad news. The good news is that there are some good choices and tactics available to you, which I'll cover in a sec. The bad news is that there are also some bad choices available to you, and I'll cover those too. And also, even with the good choices, you're likely still going to lose the shares at some point. But at the very least, you should still be able to squeeze more from the trade than you otherwise would have. We'll look at 3 potential ways to do that. And just as important, we'll also explore how to know whether you should keep up that process or when it's time to close the books on the trade or campaign, lock in your gains, and say goodbye to the shares. But also pat yourself on the back for a profitable trade or campaign. Now, before we get into all this, let me throw out a couple of resources that may be useful for you. I have a covered calls section over on my Great Option Trading Strategies website, link in the description below, with close to 24 articles on all sorts of angles on covered calls, from the basics to all aspects of selection, setup, and managing positions. There's bound to be something over there that will improve your trading or give you some fresh insights. And second, if you're new or relatively new to the world of option trading, it does take a while to wrap your head around options. What they are, how they work, the different ways they can be traded. If you're at that stage, you might want to download a free copy of my user-friendly 10-page guide, Options Are Easy, Stop Stressing and Learn What Options Can Do For You, also on the Great Option Trading Strategies website on the free reports page, and that link is also included in the description below. Okay, back to today's topic. What can you do when you've written a covered call and then Mr. Market, like Zeus with a thunderbolt, blasts your stock higher? Now, just to make sure we're on the same page, I'm assuming that you believe the upside move is for real and won't just reverse itself in the coming days. And I'm also assuming that you either want to retain the shares and or squeeze more out of the trade than what you'd otherwise walk away with if you allow yourself to be forced out more or less at present. In my view and experience, your number one go-to choice is to roll your covered call out and up to a higher strike price, which of course raises the cap on how much you get to participate in the stock's capital appreciation. For example, let's say you sold or wrote a $35 covered call when the underlying stock was trading at $32.50 a share. And then, maybe gradually, maybe all at once, but one day you look up and the stock is now trading at $40 a share. So your returns, if held until expiration, would basically be the premium collected up front when you sold or wrote the covered call, plus the share price appreciation from $32.50 a share up to the $35 share price level. So if you can work the strike price up from $35 to say $37.50, and assuming of course that the stock doesn't pull back below $37.50 prior to the new expiration date, you just added another $2.50 a share of capital gains, which are unrealized of course until you're actually out of the trade. Okay, that sounds kind of obvious, but here's where it gets a little or a lot more challenging, because I personally have a couple of very important requirements before I'll make this move. The first one is that I will only roll out and up to a higher strike price if I can get a net credit. That means I collect more, even if it's just a small amount, for selling or writing the new covered call at a higher strike price and at a later expiration date than what it cost me to buy back or close out the old or expiring covered call. What I won't do is roll out and up to a higher strike price if it requires that I incur a net debit in the process. Say, for example, that I roll out and up from $35 to $37.50, which is a $2.50 strike price improvement, but it cost me $1.25 a contract to do so. On one level, this is a valid move. I'm paying $1.25 a contract for a $2.50 share of gains, except those gains are unrealized. If the stock continues trading above $37.50 a share, then it works out. But what happens if the stock pulls back to my original $35 strike price level? Now, not only are my unrealized capital gains gone, but I've given back some, most, all, more than my original premium I collected. Every time I touch a trade, meaning it's now turned into some kind of campaign, I want to be adding to my accumulated net premium levels. I don't have to maximize my net premium collection. In this case, I would sacrifice the amount of net premium I'm collecting in exchange for working the strike price higher. But even if I only collect a 10, 15, 20 cent net credit on my roll out and up, I haven't sacrificed any of my downside protection or cost basis in the hopes that I collect more upside capital gains. And I can calculate my downside protection or cost basis by taking the cost of my shares and subtracting my accumulated net premium that I've collected on the campaign to date. Okay, that's my perspective in any case. You may have a different perspective, of course, and that's fine. But it's super important that you have 100% clarity regarding what you're giving up in terms of downside protection if you pay a net debit to work an in-the-money covered call to a higher strike price. And second, there's one other requirement I have if I'm trying to roll out and up to a higher strike for a net credit. And that is, I don't want to roll out more than 3 monthly expiration cycles. On rare occasions, I have rolled out 4 months when that third monthly cycle wasn't currently available to trade. But going out any longer than that, and you're really getting into the territory of being very inefficient with your capital. You're just tying it up for a long time, and for what? A relatively small improvement in the trade? Now, one of my favorite analysis tools when it comes to option selling decision making, from the setup to all aspects of managing a trade, is the annualized metric. In this case, you can see how efficient or inefficient a roll out and up to a higher strike is simply by annualizing what you're getting from the move. In this case, your net credit plus the share price improvement over the holding period. The annualized rate on your net credit will likely be pretty minimal. The much bigger component will be from the strike price being worked higher. So if I can increase the strike price for net credit, but I have to kick it out really far in time, I can easily run the numbers and see in black and white how efficient or inefficient that move is. If, for example, again, combining the net credit along with the increased capital appreciation from working the strike price higher, I see that I'm only accruing these additional returns at a 5 or 6 or 7% annualized rate, and all this capital is tied up for 6 months, 9 months, a year. Well, let's just say there are better opportunities and probably better choices within the trade itself. Now, regarding the annualized metric, I've got another link in the description below for my article on that. What the annualized metric is, why I love it so much, how to use it, and most importantly, how to calculate it. Okay, so as you can probably guess, rolling out and up for a net credit is the most ideal, but it's also the most challenging. And the deeper in the money your covered call is, meaning the more the stock has blasted above your strike price, the harder it will be to pull off. Finally, there are also a couple other factors that impact your ability to roll out and up for a net credit. One is the implied volatility levels of the options in question. If this is a trade on Coinbase, for example, with much higher premium levels, you're going to have a better chance than if the trade is on Procter & Gamble, where implied volatility levels will be much more muted. The other factor is how the strike prices are structured. The tighter the increments, the easier it will be to roll out and up to higher strikes for a net credit. It's obviously going to be much easier working the strike price up $1 than it would be $2.50 or, God forbid, $5. That brings us to choice or tactic number 2. If most of the time you're not going to be able to roll out and up to a higher strike price for a net credit within a 3-month time frame, but you still want to squeeze more from your in-the-money covered call trade, your next best choice in my view is to simply roll straight out to a future expiration date at the same strike price. So in my previous $35 covered call example, if I see that I can't realistically roll out and up to a higher strike price, I'm going to start running the numbers and look at what the return profiles would be for rolling 1, 2, 3 months out. Again, fantastic use of the annualized metric. If I run the numbers and I see that, hey, I can roll this baby out and the net premium I collect for doing so, again, what I collect for selling the new covered call, less what it costs me to close the old covered call, and that works out to be a 10, 12, 15% annualized rate. It may not be perfect. I may not be able to keep my shares, but I may be very happy with those returns. If, on the other hand, I'm only getting 3, 4, 5% annualized over the new holding period, I'm probably not going to want to jump all over that. But you have to make that decision for yourself. Again, this is why I love the annualized metric so much, because it's a tool that shows you the speed at which your money is making more of itself. The good news, of course, is that rolling out to the same strike price is much easier to pull off. A net credit will almost always be available, unless a position trades really, really deep in the money. The question you have to determine is, at what point does the annualized rate at which you're accruing this additional net premium become too low to maintain the process? One quick counter note, the process works the other way too. If you expect some kind of pullback, but not a crash, it could make sense to keep the position open and keep rolling, because if or as the shares move back down some, future net credits should increase. Option pricing 101, the nearer an option strike price is to the current share price, the more time value will be included in those. But if you're only getting what are equivalent to money market rates and you don't see the stock slowing down or anything, it's definitely not an efficient use of your trading capital. And at that point, you have a choice to make. Throw in the towel, exit the trade, lock in your gains, and move on, or go with choice tactic number 3. Now, fair warning, this one is a little more of an advanced approach. Not that it's super complicated or all that difficult to understand, but it does introduce more moving parts into the trade. So if you're new or relatively new to options, you might want to pass on this. Because if you do go this route, it's super important that you fully understand how the underlying stock doing X, Y, or Z will affect different aspects of the new construction of the trade. So if the goal on an in-the-money covered call is to work that strike price up over time, but the roll out and up doesn't pay for that move on its own, a workaround is to consider selling a cash secured put to bring in additional premium, providing that this additional premium can close the deficit or the net debit on your covered call roll out and up. For example, if it costs me $1.25 net debit to roll my $35 covered call out and up to the $37.50 strike, but I can sell a separate $35 cash secured put for at least $1.25 a contract, then I've just creatively paid for the strike price adjustment higher. Now, this is important. The strike price you choose for your new short put has to make sense. In our $35 covered call example, where the stock is now trading at $40 a share, I definitely wouldn't sell a $40 put. True, that would bring in a lot more premium, but if the stock pulls back, now you've got a new problem, an in-the-money short put that you have to try to repair. You always have to take things on a case-by-case basis, of course. And you probably also want to look at specific technicals, such as where near-term support appears to be. But I would either go with a strike where there's a clear appearance of support, or at a strike price that's no higher than the current strike of my covered call. That would form a short straddle of sorts. And if there is a pullback, then by definition, I can only have one side of the position trade in the money on me. Also, speaking of technicals, despite the stock's nice little rally, if it looks like shares are running into resistance and could be in the process of topping out and turning over in the near term, I would hold off selling any puts. It may very well be that the out-of-the-money put you sell would be perfectly safe. But if there is a near-term pullback, you'll get better pricing by waiting. Or you can get the same price at an even lower strike. Or, depending on how much the stock pulls back, you might not even need the short put at all, as it may now be possible to get a net credit for rolling your covered call out and up to a higher strike. But being able to sell both sides of a stock really gives you a lot of flexibility. However, I want to stress again that I don't recommend this if you're pretty new to options, because when you introduce offsetting options to a trade, well, sometimes these campaigns can take on a life of their own. But personally, I'm making these kinds of modifications and adjustments to positions all the time. But I've also been battling Mr. Market in the options market for more than 2 decades, so a lot of this has become second nature by now. Okay, so what are the bad choices that are available to you? If rolling out and up for a net credit, rolling straight out for a net credit, and possibly rolling out and up for an overall net credit with a little help from an offsetting short put are the good choices when it comes to dealing with an in-the-money covered call trade, what are the bad choices? Well, we've already covered these in passing, but again, this is totally my subjective opinion, but I think any kind of roll or adjustment involving a net debit is a bad move. If you have to pay to work your covered call strike price higher, think about what's really happening. You're booking a loss on the covered call, the short call that you're rolling higher. Now, stocks are always zigging and zagging, and there's no guarantee that the stock is just going to continue trading higher and higher. Okay, now this may sound harsh, but believe me, it's a point I've made to myself many, many times in the past. If you were that good at predicting where a stock would trade in the near term, you never would have found yourself in this position to begin with. Otherwise, you never would have written the covered call in the first place. So what makes you so sure that you know the stock won't pull back? Because if that happens after you've rolled out and up for a net debit, you're not only losing money on the covered call portion of the trade, but now the extra capital appreciation you were trying to capture or claw back, that's disappeared as well. Again, definitely not judging, because I've been in that position myself many, many times. And by extension, simply buying to close your covered call for a loss with no intention of rolling or adjusting it because you don't want to lose the shares is also a risky move and arguably dumb. I've seen this mindset before. Someone sets up a covered call, the stock blasts higher, and they decide to take a bath on the short call so they can keep the shares because they think the stock is going to keep trading higher and higher. That very well may be the case, but again, with this mindset, I have to ask, what changed so that your predictive powers suddenly became so much better versus when you first set up the trade? The other choice I see, which I think is a mistake, is to roll out too far in time. Now, everyone has to develop their own best practices, of course, but to reiterate, it takes an extraordinary situation for me to roll or adjust a short option position out more than 3 monthly expiration cycles. But again, that's where the annualized metric is so helpful. You can run the numbers on all sorts of scenarios and see in black and white the rate at which you're bringing in additional income or the rate at which you're improving the trade. And the lower it is on a single-digit annualized basis, the more I think you have to ask yourself, is that truly the best use of your time and capital? Because remember, by definition, this is a winning trade, not a losing trade. And that brings me to my final point, keeping perspective. I no longer remotely remember who this person was, but I used to spend a lot of time on Seeking Alpha 10 to 15 years ago. And one of the commenters I remember was this proficient and experienced covered call trader. And I always remember one comment he made about this very situation. Basically, his point was, hey, when you trade covered calls, sometimes stocks are going to get called away from you and you shouldn't stress over it. It's not the end of the world. In fact, it's actually a good thing because you made money on the trade. And this, I think, was why he was able to be so nonchalant about things. It's just a matter of time, but at some point, that same stock that you were so worried about losing is probably going to give you another new covered call trading opportunity. Okay, we've covered a lot here today, but there's another angle we haven't discussed yet. I don't want to make this a super long video, so I'll cover it in a future video, but there's a key issue that every covered call trader should have 100% clarity on. And that's, why are you selling covered calls in the first place? Meaning, what's your ultimate objective? Because there are actually multiple objectives that covered calls can help you achieve. But I think that's something that should be explored in its own video. So stay tuned for that. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, you might want to do that so you don't miss it when I post it. Okay, if you have any questions about anything or would like me to clarify anything, please let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this and would like more option selling resources, you might want to check out my Great Option Trading Strategies website. Link in the description below. The site has been around 17 years now, and you're not going to find a more comprehensive collection of free, quality option trading resources, from downloadable special reports and trade case studies to hundreds of articles on selling options for income, as well as incorporating options into value investing and dividend growth investing portfolios. I also have a section of the site devoted to covered calls, and I put a link in the description below for that too. Best of all, no annoying pop-up ads, and you're not going to get spammed every time you turn around. There's also a contact form on the site if you want to reach out directly. I'd love to hear from you, either via the site or in the comments section below. Okay, until next time.